Hello everyone. Welcome to the last episode of 2025 Wehry History and Entertainment News of the Berkshires and beyond. 2025 was a challenging year for many arts and entertainment companies locally. But they survived and even thrived in these times. On this episode, I'll be reviewing their seasons and playing the plays, concerts, art shows, and more that dominated Berkshire County. In addition, I'll also be giving my top 5 movies of the year and discussing why it was difficult even making a top 5 list. First, it's time for this episode's trivia question. This episode's question is, when was Tanglewood and Lenox founded? Now, for the 2025 WWHEN Year in Review. As a reminder, in the last episode, I discussed Mass Mocha's and Berkshire Theater Group's seasons, as well as a review of the 2025 Basketball Hall of Fame class. The first story in review we'll be talking about for this episode is Barrington Stage Company. BSC started their season with the production of the classical musical Camelot. The next show was the play Eisenhower, The Piece of Ground. This focused on former President Eisenhower and his Army career and presidential life. Up next was the political drama N/A, which focused on a hypothetical event. Then was the musical Fuzzy, which was a heartfelt puppet piece similar to that of Avenue Q, but more for families. After that was the one-woman show Joan. This focused on the life of comedian, talk show host, and red carpet queen Joan Rivers. Finally was the comedy King James. This focused on friendship and basketball a world away. All these shows were extremely popular. So 2026's slate should be busy as well. Up next are concerts and other events from the Stationery Factory in Dalton. Despite being a small venue, they actually had a good amount of events this year. Most of them I'll be discussing were cover bands. First was the cover band Running on Empty, which covered songs from the singer Jackson Browne. Up after that was the 70s style singer Tom Deanna, followed by 2 additional cover bands. Seven Wonders, which performs Fleetwood Mac music, and Vintage Skynyrd, which, as the name suggests, performs music from the band Lynyrd Skynyrd. The next Stationery Factory concert was that of the rock band Trapt. followed by a Stevie Nicks cover band, Wild Heart. This was followed by a magic show hosted by Peter Antonio, then yet another cover band, Beyond Purple, which covered the hits of Deep Purple. Another concert was a festival called Deadfall, which highlighted local bands covering Grateful Dead music. And it was for a great cause too. Donations were given to a local food pantry. Finally, there was the second annual Dalton Country Fest, which highlighted music from the country genre. Another concert venue this year was Tanglewood in Lenox. They had a series of popular artist concerts this year. This year's artists included a Prairie Home Companion with its new age performance style, James Taylor making his annual performance, Bare Naked Ladies, Sugar Ray, and Fastball highlighting a 90s rock/alternative show, iconic musicians Emmylou Harris and Graham Nash, who returned to Tanglewood exactly 50 years after first performing there. The Peabody Award-winning comedy, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, Grammy Award-winning singer Bonnie Raitt, popular comedian John Mulaney, and finally, award-winning jazz musician Jon Batiste. Tanglewood also supplies the answer to this episode's trivia question. As a reminder, this episode's question was, when was Tanglewood founded? The answer is 1934. In August 1934, a group of music-loving Berkshire summer residents arranged for members of the New York Philharmonic to perform 3 outdoor concerts at Interlaken in Lenox, a successful venture that was repeated in 1935. The festival committee then invited Serge Koussevitzky and the Boston Symphony Orchestra to take part the following year. The orchestra's trustees accepted, and on August 13, 1936, the BSO gave its first concert in the Berkshires at Homewood. The 3-concert series was given under a large tent for an audience of nearly 15,000 people. Today, the shed in which the majority of the concerts take place is named after Mr. Koussevitzky. Up next on our year-end review is the Wehry Theater in Great Barrington. They had many different concerts and stand-up comedy events. First was a performance with Billy F. Gibbons, most famous as the guitarist for ZZ Top. Afterwards were several concerts with the group Close Encounters with Music, followed by a stand-up performance by famed comedian Patton Oswalt. The next Wehry performance was a concert with country music royalty Rosanne Cash, followed by a stand-up show by award-winning actor Paul Reiser. Wehry then had 2 shows with musicians Matt Casson and Natalie Merchant. Wehry Theater's season concluded with concerts by guitarist John Pizzarelli and the Berkshire Bach Society with their New Year's show. We will now be shifting our focus from the 2025 play and concert scene to the 2025 art scene. Up first is the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown. The Clark held a wide variety of art exhibits this year. They included artist Marielle Capana, whose work was a year-long exhibit dedicated to 2 new site-specific oil paintings, as well as a monumental 2-sided fresco. Pastoral on Paper, which highlighted 17th and 18th century European books, drawings, and prints of idealized landscapes. A Room of Her Own, in which artists took inspiration from author Virginia Woolf's stories. Groundwork, a year-long exhibit featuring a dynamic range of outdoor presentations by several international artists. Bernice Abbott's Modern Lens, which focused on the photographer's snapshots of New York City in the 1920s and 1930s. Isamu Noguchi, whose work was inspired by time and clocks. Raffaella della Olga, whose pieces are inspired by typewriters, language, and ink ribbons. And Shadow Visionaries, French artists against the current, which highlighted artwork from France in the mid-19th century. On a non-exhibit note, the Clark Art is looking for a new artistic director. Current director Olivier Masselet will be stepping down starting in July 2026. Masselet, a widely respected curator and art historian, will return to his native France to pursue a variety of independent projects. WWHEN will provide updates on the search for a new Clark Art artistic director in the coming months. For our next piece, we will be discussing the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge. They held 4 major exhibits through the year. They were Original Sisters, which focused on history-making women through the world and was curated by artist Anita Kunz. A series of early 20th century advertising artwork, which included pieces from Norman Rockwell himself. An exhibit about artist Walter Wick, best known as the illustrator for the I Spy series, and an exhibit focusing on Jazz Age art from the 1910s through the 1930s. There were several other local arts and entertainment events I also discussed that didn't quite fit into the ones previously mentioned, or only had one thing mentioned for them. These included festivals such as North Adams's Winterfest, Adams's Thunderfest, the Pittsfield Jazz Festival, and the Berkshire Art Center's year-end art sale. Additionally, I mentioned the reopening of the Berkshire Carousel and several different bazaars that took place in the spring, summer, and winter. For one of my best shows, however, I discussed several winter events going on in Massachusetts. Nightwood, Winter Lights, Festival of Trees, A Christmas Carol at the Unicorn Theater, and so much more were discussed. If you are curious about this episode in particular, you can watch the November 18th episode on YouTube or PCTV's website. Additionally, there were other arts and entertainment businesses that went under-discussed or weren't even discussed at all in 2025. Hopefully next year, I will find more stories of theirs to tell. One of the fun parts of WWHEN is taking viewers on road trips to places outside of Berkshire County. 2025 was no exception, as I attempted to expand viewers' knowledge of Western Massachusetts and beyond. As a reminder, I've already discussed the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield in the first half of the year in review. The first road trip I discussed in 2025 was the Greenfield Winter Carnival. For over a century, the Greenfield Winter Carnival has been a cherished tradition uniting the Franklin County community to embrace the joys of the winter season. Next was the Benesky Museum of Natural History in Amherst. This museum is similar to that of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, but on a smaller, more intimate scale. Afterwards, we visited Northampton for a trip to their library called the Forbes Library and the Thorns Marketplace, which contains many different shops and even an arcade. I actually visited these places in person shortly afterwards. What's interesting about the Forbes Library is that it does not use the standard Dewey Decimal System, but rather the Cutter system. In fact, the Forbes Library is one of the few remaining ones in the United States to use this system. The Cutter system is extremely complicated to describe and would probably take a whole episode to discuss. If you are curious about the history of the Cutter system, you can visit forbeslibrary.org. Up next was a visit to the Mass Mutual Center in Springfield, where they held a Lego brick convention. This is an event similar to Comic-Con, but instead of comics being the highlight, Legos were the feature instead. Afterwards, viewers took a trip to Stanley Park in Westfield, a beautiful 300-plus acre park filled with trails, rose gardens, an arboretum, and its most famous animal, ducks. The next WWHEN road trip was one that was new, Hooplandia. This takes place at the Big E complex in West Springfield and features the largest 3-on-3 basketball tournament in the Northeast. I visited Hooplandia afterwards, and it was fun to see all the teams in action. One recommendation is to bring water, as it is held in the very hot summer. For the next stop, viewers were taken outside of Massachusetts to Lebanon Valley Speedway. This is a popular race course located in West Lebanon, New York, which is about a half-hour drive from Berkshire County. After that was a trip to Polar Park, a baseball stadium in Worcester, to see the Worcester Red Sox play. In a year that Pittsfield had no baseball due to construction, this was a good place to watch baseball in Western Massachusetts. Finally was another trip to West Springfield, back to the grounds of the Big E for the actual event this year. This year's Big E was filled with agricultural events, amusement park rides, food, and concerts ranging from R&B and country to rock and hip-hop. It's now time for this episode's movie portion of WWHEN. 2025 was an odd year for movies, as there were many box office hits and blunders. For WWHEN, picking a top 5 list was challenging. I saw many movies this year, but some of the biggest hits did not impress me. For me, it seems like a lot of movies this year were on autopilot. There was a lack of creativity. With that said, I did see some really good movies. Here are the top 5 movies for 2025. Before I begin, though, there are 2 ground rules for my list. 1. A movie must have been released in 2025 to have made my list. 2. All movies were discussed in previous WWHEN episodes. It wouldn't make sense for me to include a movie my viewers wouldn't know. At number 5 is Drop. While this movie probably won't appear on many best of year lists, this tense psychological action film impressed me with its strong lead and excellent set pieces. At number 4 is The Bad Guys 2. Easily the best animated film of the year, with its excellent animation, great voice work, and a clever plot. At number 3 is Thunderbolts. Despite Marvel's difficult box office year, Thunderbolts' simple tale of heroes looking for redemption was their biggest 2025 hit. At number 2 is Jurassic World Rebirth. In my original review, I wrote that there were no bad Jurassic Park movies, and this one proved it. This was easily the best theatrical experience I had in 2025. But at number 1, it's Sinners, and it wasn't even close. From the moment I saw this film, I knew it was going to be number 1. This vampire movie has everything going for it. Scary scenes, great performances, great use of music, and more. Sinners is not only my favorite film of the year, it is one of my favorite films of all time. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the Scream film series. While it is disqualified from the 2025 top 5 list because none of the movies in the franchise were released this year, binge watching all 6 of the films was my favorite movie experience of the year. Happily, Scream 7 is being released in 2026. So perhaps it can make the top 5 list next year. That ends this episode of Wehry History and Entertainment News of the Berkshires and beyond. If you would like to watch this or any other WWHEN episode again, you can visit PCTV's website shown here or my YouTube page. And I would also like to thank CTSB TV and NBCTC for showing my show on their public access station. Thank you, and have a happy new year, and see you in 2026.